One morning, Nanaki awoke to find that the brothers were nowhere to be seen. At first he figured they now not only slept apart from him, but also hunted for food on their own. Suddenly he heard a gunshot, immediately followed by the roar of an evil bear.
That was Pazu.
Nanaki, who could now find his way through the forest blindfolded, immediately ran in the direction of Pazu's roar. When he finally arrived there, he thought he was experiencing deja vu. That day, the boy had fallen to the ground, looking scared as the evil bear circled him. It was Pazu. He seemed to be keeping an eye on the thickets nearby, probably waiting for Rin. Pazu stood up on his hind legs, stretched out his paws in the air, and roared loudly. Then Rin's roar could be heard in reply from the undergrowth. The boy had fear in his eyes as he searched the area for an escape route. When he spotted Nanaki, there was a spark of hope in his eyes.
Red! It's me! You still remember me, right? You saved me here in the forest.
Back then, Nanaki couldn't just allow the boy to be killed. But today things were different, and he knew the words he had to say to him.
You are here in the forest, so you must abide by the rules of the forest.
When the boy heard Nanaki's words, a smile crossed his face. The knowledge that Nanaki could really speak filled him with joy.
Quite an intrepid child.
Alright, Red.
The boy jumped to his feet and ran toward his gun, which Pazu had likely swiped away with his paw.
I didn't say that to help you.
Nanaki was still surprised by the boy's reaction as he reached for the gun. He feared that Pazu could be shot and wanted to dive out of the undergrowth when suddenly Rin appeared. With a single swipe, he knocked the boy off his feet. He crashed to the ground, motionless. Nanaki wanted to intervene, but he told himself that the boy had to fight in the forest under the rules of the forest. If he lost, it was just bad luck. Pazu and Rin circled around the boy. After a while, they stood up on their hind legs and roared into the sky.
That's enough!
Nanaki jumped out of the undergrowth and stood in front of the boy, shielding his body from the two bears. Their powerful claws swung down toward the boy and slashed into Nanaki's back, tearing through his flesh. When the two bears realized the situation changed, they immediately withdrew their claws and let out a desperate roar. It reminded Nanaki of the day they first met, when they had found their dead mother.
Don't worry about it. Now go!
The two bears pulled away and disappeared quickly into the forest. Nanaki heard the quiet groaning of the boy behind him.
Son, where are you? I told you not to run off on your own, damn it!
That must be the hunter's voice.
Nanaki quickly hid in the undergrowth.
Hey, Gordy! What happened?
As expected, it was the boy's father who came running, but he was followed by another person. Nanaki was shocked at the sight.
That was an evil bear, right?
It was a young woman dressed in a Turk's uniform. Elena took out a small vial, probably a healing potion, from the side pocket of her jacket and began to treat the injured boy.
What's going on? Does this mean the Shinra company is still active?
Nanaki regretted not paying more attention to the affairs of humans. He watched as the hunter carried the boy out of the forest on his back, while Elena took out her cell phone and made a call.
I found one. I'll try my luck again tomorrow.
When Nanaki returned to the stone house in the forest clearing, he found Pazu and Rin nervously pacing. No sooner had they spotted Nanaki, they hid themselves in the undergrowth.
I'm not mad at you.
Nanaki slumped to the ground. Although he wasn't really angry, his wounds still hurt. He needed a little rest and recuperation. Tomorrow the woman from Shinra would return to the forest. It seemed they had it in for Nebel bears, so tomorrow would be a busy day. Nanaki could sense Pazu and Rin approaching him, but he closed his eyes. Soon he could feel the brothers licking the wounds on his back.
Thank you, Pazu, Rin.
Blessed with the fast recovery abilities of the beast, Nanaki slowly stood up. He looked around, but couldn't see any sign of the two bears anywhere. Normally they slept within sight. Nanaki became suspicious and searched the nearby undergrowth looking for them, with no luck. Nebel bears weren't usually nocturnal. Nanaki started to panic and began his search in the forest. After a while, Nanaki believed he heard gunshots in the distance from outside the forest. He began to tremble all over. Gilligan, who hadn't shown up for some time, appeared again. He cowered on the ground as he trembled with fear. By now he had forgotten how best to resist against Gilligan's attacks.
What am I supposed to do again? Ah, yes. Pazu and Rin. They can get rid of this fear. But where are they?
Nanaki clenched his teeth and headed for the edge of the forest. With his head lowered, he hurried on, trying to fight against the trembling. As the scent of the air changed, he knew he had left the forest. Nanaki lifted his head. Before him lay a gently sloping grassy plain. The hunters had trampled a well-beaten track through the grass. As Nanaki followed the path with his eyes, he saw several lights in the distance. It was a small village. The largest of the lights flickered in the darkness.
That must be a fire. Maybe a campfire. Is it being used for cooking?
As Nanaki took in everything in sight, he focused, trying to rid himself of Gilligan, but with no effect. Nanaki walked on with determination toward the lights.
It is.
Actually, Nanaki had already guessed it. The campfire illuminated the figures of Bazu and Rin. The two had been tied to huge posts in a familiar pose, with their front paws stretched upward. Their tails had been cut off. Suddenly, Nanaki felt something take over him. Gilligan was no longer there, though he was still scared to look closely at the two bears, so instead looked over his surroundings. There were 3 small cabins, all lit up. Pricking his ears, he could hear men and women laughing. Perhaps they were celebrating the successful hunt. In any case, no one seemed to be keeping watch. Nanaki still didn't have the heart to look directly at the brothers.
Did Bazu and Rin come here to take revenge? Such emotions doesn't belong to beasts. Humans and Nebelbear might all be natural enemies. That was nothing personal. Personal feelings play no role between individuals of the two species. If anything, humans are the only species capable of hostility and hatred towards another.
Perhaps it was the air outside the forest, but Nanaki suddenly felt the desire for revenge in his heart.
This isn't the emotion of a beast. It's human.
Suddenly, Nanaki heard a faint roar from the direction of the bears. He was frightened. It sounded like cries of pain. Even though they were big, they were still very young. Dark thoughts spread through Nanaki's consciousness. It wasn't Gilligan, but these thoughts clouded his mind more and more. Slowly he was being taken over by the desire for revenge, and it seemed to be gaining the upper hand. Then he heard the cries of a baby from one of the cabins.
So these people have a small child. It must be very cute. This must be a sign. All babies are free from sin.
Nanaki's heart was being torn between human and beast. A bullet hit the ground just a few inches from Nanaki. He hadn't even heard the shot. Nanaki was torn from his trance. He realized that he was so far gone that he couldn't even recognize the sound of gunfire. He looked over at Bazu and Rin again. The roar he heard must have just been in his imagination. The two were already long dead. This time he looked into their eyes. Behind their half-closed eyelids, he could see the flames of the campfire reflected in their red eyes. Nanaki felt like the flames were jumping on him, burning in his eyes. Soon the whole area glowed in a glistening red, and he could see nothing else. Another gunshot rang through the air. Nanaki heard it this time. He followed the sound and sprinted to one of the cabins. With a single bound, he jumped through the window. Glass shattered with a loud crash. Several armed men stood before him.
I was spurred on by my human ties, but now I stand before you as a wild animal.
Human faces surrounded Nanaki, but he could no longer distinguish them. Another shot rang out, and his cheek was flooded with agonizing pain. That was the signal to attack. Nanaki leapt at the man standing closest to him. He could barely remember what happened after that. He merely had a vague recollection of the pain as the bullet pierced his body, as well as the cries of a boy.
I wanted to be your friend.
When Nanaki opened his eyes, he was lying on a wooden bed which was covered in blood. He let his gaze wander. In one corner of the room sat a familiar figure dressed in red. The man looked over at him.
Can you get up?
Vincent? Vincent! What are you doing here?
I should ask you the same thing.
As usual, Vincent didn't reveal much. Apparently he had spent his days aimlessly traveling the world. He said with a little self-deprecation that he had probably waited all this time for something to finally happen. One day, by chance, he spotted a Shinra helicopter in the sky and followed it, which led him to this village. The helicopter had landed here. Elena of the Turks was probably on the search for something and had gone into the forest with the hunters. A while later, they returned carrying a wounded boy. And that evening, the two bears suddenly showed up. There was a terrible uproar, but the hunters finally managed to bring the bears down. Elena had obviously got what she came for, then left with the helicopter. Just as Vincent was about to follow, Nanaki suddenly appeared. Vincent had heard shots, and then watched Nanaki jumping into one of the cabins.
When I got here, you had a hunter pinned to the ground, and you were about to bite through his throat. The child was screaming that he wanted to be your friend or something like that. I have no idea what happened, but I didn't see the Nanaki I knew. You were like a wild beast attacking people. So I shot you.
After Vincent had shot Nanaki, the hunters had no idea what had happened, and it would have been too dangerous to leave them there with their guns. So he drove them from the cabin, and even from the village.
I gave them a little scare, you know. All I had to do was transform.
After that, Vincent treated the unconscious Nanaki and waited for him to regain consciousness. Nanaki looked around the cabin. There was blood all over the floor.
Did I kill someone?
No.
That's good.
The two were silent for a while. Nanaki tried to get up to look out the window. Although he was dizzy, he somehow managed to stand on 4 legs.
They took away the bears that were outside. Should I have stopped them?
No. They will probably be of use to them. That's the rule of the forest. Or perhaps it's the rule beyond the forest. Vincent, I just don't understand anything anymore.
Tell me, what happened?
Vincent silently listened to Nanaki's story. He told him everything, from his first encounter with the 2 helpless cubs in the forest, to his reunion here with Vincent.
What should I have done differently?
Vincent remained silent. Nanaki already suspected that Vincent probably had no answer for him either, but surprisingly, he started to speak.
Ask me. If one day you look back on all these events, you'll find the answer for yourself. But if you look back again after some time, you may suddenly get a completely different answer. In other words, there isn't just one answer. Just continue living your life, the rest will sort itself out.
What Vincent was trying to say was as simple as it was true. Never forget.
Yeah.
Nanaki thought that he understood, but equally, he felt that he actually understood nothing. All in all, he was left with a very unsatisfactory feeling.
Maybe you'll understand if I told you this.
Vincent could see right through Nanaki.
One moment you're 100% sure that what you're doing is right. But the next moment, it's already wrong. Completely wrong.
How do I know what is wrong and what isn't? No matter how much I think about it, I just can't come to the right conclusion.
That's just it.
Vincent stood up, as if to signal the end of their conversation, but he continued, like he just remembered.
You can also choose not to do anything. I made that choice once.
How did it turn out?
It was probably a fair punishment.
With a dramatic turn, Vincent's red mantle fluttered as he left the cabin. Nanaki quickly followed him. Vincent seemed to be traveling east, but before long, he left the road and headed into the wilderness.
Where are you going?
Why do you want to know?
Can't I come with you?
Why?
Well, because I won't be lonely if we're together.
Especially here in the middle of nowhere, walking along the bottom of a cliff, the height of a multi-story building. He didn't want to be alone.
Your answer is 100% wrong.
Vincent effortlessly jumped the towering cliff above them.
Vincent!
There was no answer. His red mantle had already disappeared.
Who is to say you're not wrong, Vincent?
He suddenly realized something. There was no sense in wondering who was right, or what could have been done differently. You can't change the past, only the future. What was important was to be aware of the past, to never forget it, and to learn from it. Then the answers will come to you, and will be of use to you. That's all there is to it. It's no big deal compared to living each day as it comes.
Neither I nor Basu or Rin had any worries in the forest. Our days in the forest were happy.
Nanaki leaned against the foot of the cliff, crouching on the ground, and reminisced over his time in the forest. He saw the two bear brothers in his mind, how restlessly they had always slept, though they were animals. Basu, as he played in the stream. Rin, as he fell from the tree. As the two bears caught their first fish and devoured it in one bite. Nanaki laughed out loud, but at the same time, he couldn't hold back the tears.
Farewell, beast world.
Nanaki got up and headed east. After a while, he changed his mind and headed north.